Today, we're going to build this kitchen island.
All right, so I have my leg here. I got my leg blanks from Osborne Wood Products, mainly to speed up the build time. And I've gotten several legs over the years from them and absolutely perfect. They're square. I've gotten some ornate turned ones as well, and they've always come out perfect quality. So for this project, it was just natural to go ahead and turn to them and have them send me the legs. However, I just ordered what they had in stock, right? You can do a custom order, size, length, dimensions, things like that. I went ahead and ordered what they had in stock already, which was a standard 34.5-inch leg. And that's just, so by the time you add that the 1.25-inch top, it makes up a 36-inch for the kitchen island. But mine's gonna have casters on it. Mine's gonna have 2-inch casters, but with the base, included the total height of the casters 2 3/4. And I want the finished height at 36. So I'm gonna cut these down, right? So I'm gonna actually cut them down to 31 3/4, and that gives me 36 inches once I add the caster and the top.
Now that we cut the leg blanks down to size, I'm going to go ahead and cut the aprons to their final dimensions as well. So I'm using pocket hole joinery for the aprons to the legs. And I'm using the Craig Foreman because it's quick and easy. And now I'm going to go ahead and do a final finish sanding of all the pieces because it's easier to sand the pieces now while they are individual pieces before they're all glued up as one whole piece. And prior to the final sanding, I'm going to go ahead and pop the grain. This is just to raise the grain so it has a smooth finish.
All right, I'm getting ready to go ahead and start the assembly. I'm gonna assemble the top aprons first, and then I will measure for the bottom shelf and cut the bottom shelf, since the aprons and the bottom shelf will be fixed in place and only the middle shelf will be floating. That will give me the opportunity to go ahead and measure for the bottom and make sure it's square. I'm gonna put the short aprons on first and connect those between the two legs before I connect the long aprons. All right. Because I want this 1/8-inch reveal right here when the apron is on, just to give that little bit of a shadow line to make it look a little bit better, a little bit more visual appealing. I'm going to use some mag shims, and if you know anything about the mag shims, they come in 1/8-inch increments and 1/16-inch increment. So I'm just going to take it and I'll lay the leg down and I'll put my mag shim right there, and then I'll just take, in fact, I'll probably go ahead and use 2 mag shims since I have such a wide apron, and I'll use those, so that will create that 1/8-inch reveal after I've attached the apron. I'm going to go ahead and use pocket holes because they're strong and they're quick, so I'll reinforce it with glue, and the glue is really going to do the holding power between the plywood. Since it's not true ingrain, it won't suck it up near as fast, and it'll offer a lot of strength.
Because the bottom and the middle floating shelves are made of plywood, I'm going to go ahead and edge band them with solid wood. And this will just give that solid wood look from the very front. And I'm going to glue them on, and I'm not going to add any mechanical fasteners here because I'm going to trim them down to size. So I purposely made the hardwood edge banding extra wide so I can trim them down to the exact size that I'm going to need. So I'm just going to use some Titebond quick and thick glue here, and then I'm going to go ahead and tape all the pieces down to apply the right amount of pressure until the glue sets up.
All right, because I want my bottom shelf to sit flush to the outside corners of the legs, I'm going to need to notch out the corners. All right, so there's a variety of ways you can do it. You can measure it and transfer your measurements, but I'm just going to use my Craig multi-mark here. You can use a combination square. I don't have a combination square large enough to do it, so this works just fine. And basically, I just butt it up until it's flush on this side, and it should be flush on this side because these are 4-inch square legs. And now I have a reference to lay out onto the bottom shelf, and I know I need to draw a line 4 inches this way and 4 inches this way. So let's go ahead and take the island off the bench here. Let's put the bottom shelf on, and I'll show you how I'm going to draw out those legs.
I'm going to trim off these corner pieces using a clean blade on the jigsaw, and I'm going to cut just on the inside of the line because I want the shelf to be a snug fit between the legs. Now it's time to assemble the bottom thick shelf to the base, and I'm just going to use some Titebond 2, and I'm going to glue the corners, and then later on, after I have it set in place and clamped up, I'm going to go back and add just a couple pocket screws into each corner from the underside so they can't be seen from the top.
All right, so to connect my vertical piece here, I've taken one and I've found the middle of it here, and then I found the middle of the opening, and I'm gonna add a little glue. I'm gonna line up this line with this line, and then I'm gonna line up the outside edges, and I'll know that this vertical rail is perfectly centered. And then I'll drill in a couple pocket holes. And then for finishing later on, I'll just go ahead and patch the pocket hole so you won't see it once it's painted.
And because I want to have the middle shelves floating and there's going to be two independent of each other, one on the left side, one on the right side, I'm just drilling these shelf pin holes. This Craig jig is super easy to use, but you can also make your own homemade jig just using some thin hardboard and a straight edge. These middle shelves are cut the exact same way as the bottom shelf, except I just cut them in half so there will be two independent floating shelves.
All right, when it comes to the top for this mobile kitchen island, there's several different ways you can go about it. You can essentially just build it like a cutting board, a very large cutting board. I opted to buy one that's already made. This is a solid birch butcher block that I picked up from Home Depot. It's about 50 inches long, 25 inches wide, 1.5 inches thick. So it's just the right size that I'm going to need. In fact, it's a little large because I'm actually going to do about 44 inches by 20 inches. So I'll cut it down to what I need, but it's solid birch. And to get a top that size, make it out of birch or a maple, something that's blonde and good for cutting boards would cost me more than $100. So this is really good. You got to be careful. I did pick through several of them to make sure that I found one that had very little knots and voids in it. In fact, one of them I saw was cracked all the way down. So you do have to be kind of selective because, again, this is something that you're buying that's mass produced. But it is a quality product. You just have to find the one that was been taken care of. So I'm gonna take this over to the table saw and I'm gonna go ahead and cut it to the size that I need, and then we'll bring it over here and start prepping it for finish, right? So we're gonna sand it, we're gonna raise the grain with water, and we're gonna do that because if we don't raise the grain with water prior to putting oil on it, when they go to wipe it down with water or whatever else, it will eventually get very rough. So we're gonna pop that grain, we're gonna sand it back, then we're gonna start applying it with oil and a wax finish. And I'll show you what I'm gonna use once we come back over to the bench and start putting that finish on there. All right, so now that I've gone ahead and I've sanded it smooth after I've popped that grain, I'm gonna use some walrus oil, cutting board oil here. And I'm gonna apply a generous coat on both sides and the edges, and I'll let it soak in. And I may even apply 2 coats depending on how thirsty the wood is. And once I apply that, I let it soak in and set for a couple hours or so. Then I'm gonna come back with their wood wax oil, and this is just gonna give me like a waxier surface, just a little bit more water repellent. I will give a can of this as well to the customers because this is what I recommend refinishing with, unless you just let it get way too dry. And then I'll recommend that they pick up a bottle of mineral oil or cutting board oil. All right, so I'm gonna drill my hardware. I'm gonna use the Craig jig hardware drill because it's easy to use. It's what I have on hand. You adjust these 2 little knobs for the width of the holes. So here's the center line. So this would be perfectly centered. And then you have this fence for reference. So you do half the width of your material. I have 5-inch wide material, so I went 2.5 inches. And now that would be centered on my workpiece. And then I just take my workpiece, put a piece of blue tape on here, and mark center here. This one here is not center. That was a mismark. So I mark center, and then all I do is line up the jig with the workpiece. We throw a little clamp on here. And now my holes are perfectly drilled to match my pulls.
All right, so we lost the footage of the finishing of the base of the bench, and the drawer construction is going to be covered in another upcoming video soon.
All right, to attach the drawers, I'm going to use some 1/16 inch mag shims because I purposely sized my drawers to be 1/16 inch of a gap on all the sides. Now I'm just going to run a couple screws in from the front. And then we'll pull the drawers out. And then I'll run a couple 3/4 inch screws in from the back. All right, now just remove these 2 screws, use the backing block. And then drill your holes.
To attach the top and the base together, I'm using these Z-clips that I picked up from Rockler. And I'm just going to pre-drill the hole here, and then I'm going to attach the screw. And I'm using about 10 fasteners, so 5 per the left side of the cavity and 5 per the right side of the cavity as well. So I'm just going to pre-drill a small little pilot hole here for the casters, and then I'm going to remove the caster, drill the holes a little bit deeper before we run in the screws,